2020 was difficult. That was the start of COVID, I believe. We were going through it or hadn't went through it yet. But I think that the pressure, the fear, it wasn't as tough as it is and as it feels now. I think at that point I was still a bit more confident in our government system and the power of everybody coming together and voting and how that affects a nation. And then now I don't feel that way anymore.
Hello, friends, and thank you for joining us on Charting the Way Forward, where we deliver research-informed strategy and intelligence from across the Democratic coalition. This podcast is produced by Way to Win. I'm your host, Kerry and today I'm joined by...
I'm Jenifer Fernandez-Ancona, co-founder and chief strategy officer at Way to Win.
All right, we are tag teaming solo today, but we have exciting news. Jenifer and I get to finally start rolling out some of our research on the very important group of missing Biden voters who voted in 2020 but skipped 2024, and whom we basically refer to as Biden skippers. We're going to devote several upcoming episodes of Charting the Way Forward to these focus groups, because at Way to Win, we feel this group of voters is a critical piece of rebuilding a winning Democratic coalition, and that understanding Democrats' failure to fully engage and inspire them in 2024 is an essential piece of the electoral puzzle moving forward. The skippers are, of course, one piece of the puzzle. The swing voters, or voters who have flipped back and forth between Trump and Democrats at the top of the ticket, are the other piece. But the flippers, or what some people loosely call the middle of the electorate, have received the bulk of the attention, especially inside the Beltway and political media. So today we're going to start to get to know the Biden skippers, who have been largely overlooked and in some ways obscured in some of the post-election analysis of 2024. They number in the double-digit millions, and in conjunction with Lake Research Partners, we conducted 4 Biden skipper focus groups of demographics where Kamala Harris underperformed, specifically people under 35, mixed race, mixed gender, Latinos, and Latinas, all from battleground states. We also conducted a focus group of Black men, which we are going to cover in a separate episode. But some of that sound might be included here too, just to illustrate some points. But let's begin with some myth busting about these skippers, who have been sort of waved away in post-election analysis as ungettable or unwinnable, which we found very little evidence for that. We're going to discuss several mistruths about them and also listen to some sound. And we wanted to start with 2 big myths. One is that these Biden skippers were apathetic, and another is that they were unpersuadable. So let's listen to some sound from our focus groups and then discuss them on the other side.
Sounds great.
From this election, I genuinely thought that she was going to win based off the community that I was around. I think what was at stake was definitely how connected we are as a collective in this country. I believe that people were going towards a more progressive route, but I realized that conservatism is something that's old and comfortable for a lot of people. And like I said earlier, I think people don't want to share their opinion unless it's collectively agreed upon. And I think what happens is people see a minority group and they're like, I don't want to get treated like that minority group, so I'm going to go ahead and jump on the majority and agree with what they believe so that I'm not a target.
For myself, for the oligarchy is going, big business is just buying everything. They're the ones who are controlling everything. So it's yeah, we have a vote, but all these other people are actually the ones doing most of the heavy lifting, and they're the ones influencing everything. So they're the ones, like controlling it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I agree with there. I feel like uh they're trying to make like everyone within their circle become wealthy enough so that they retain power even when they're out of office, or just retain power for however long they want.
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. And I didn't hear anyone say democracy. What would you need to see to feel like it is a democracy?
Real democracy.
Okay, so those clips, the first one was from the group of Latinos that we did a focus group with. And then also the second one was from a group of the under 35 focus groupers. So,
Yeah.
Jen, tell me what do you hear in those clips?
Well, I think you hear people who generally are paying attention and are pretty engaged with what's going on. The first voter definitely had an analysis about what was happening in the election that was, not about being persuaded by Trump or being right wing or thinking that the campaign was too woke. I mean, I know we're going to get into that a little more later, but there was just a different theory of the case that he had that was more about how social pressure works and how groups of people can kind of make decisions together based on how they think other people are making decisions. So to me, that doesn't sound like apathetic. And then the other example from the youth group, she's talking about oligarchy, which is a pretty big concept. And I think this was when we were asking the group, what kind of system do you think we live in? We didn't prime them with any answers. We just asked them, what kind of system do you think we're living in? And she volunteered it's an oligarchy because it's the people in charge who have all the money, who are controlling all the things. And so that to me is part of the persuasion element where, we've called this out before, where that storyline wasn't really a part of the campaign. And there was some potential for it, I think, hearing these voters, that if it were part of the campaign, it would have spoken to them in a little bit of a different way than what they were hearing.
Sure enough. Sure enough. So, that you hate to look back and go, well, there was a missed opportunity, but boy, is oligarchy resonating now, that's for sure, and presents an opportunity moving forward that clearly, people like tapping into. But, two other big myths, and these are really big ones for me, about these Biden skippers, is that number one, that they were turned off by Kamala Harris being too woke, too liberal. And then there's this other myth, that if they had turned out, they would have voted for Trump anyways, that they were basically Trump leaners. And this is something we really wanted to get into. So let's hear from the skippers themselves about how they were thinking about Harris and how they were thinking about Trump.
2020 was difficult. That was the start of COVID, I believe. We were going through it or hadn't went through it yet. But I think that the pressure, the fear, it wasn't as tough as it is and as it feels now. I think at that point I was still a bit more confident in our government system and the power of everybody coming together and voting and how that affects a nation. And then now I don't feel that way anymore.
So what happened that made you, what happened between then and the 2024 election that made you not feel that sense of, I think you said trust or maybe hope that you
The
did?
loss of jobs, the increase of groceries, the increase in everything, in rent. There was more people that were in need from what I was seeing in my community, more people that were hurting and nothing was being done about it. It was like, if I felt like nobody cared. The people that should care, we depend on our government for a lot. And I don't think that they were there to show up for us, especially as women. And I mean, it's been that way for a while, in my opinion. We don't get the recognition and the resources and a lot of stuff that we need, but it felt more relevant for this coming election than it did then. I still was hopeful then, where this time around I'm like,
Right.
it's all BS, and I'm just not with it.
Well, I was saying Trump got my vote when it was him and Hillary.
Okay.
When it was Trump and Biden, I was like, Trump said that my paycheck was going to go up before I got out. I got out in 2018. I never saw a pay raise. So I was like, okay, well, I get stuff takes time. Maybe it'll come in on the back end or something like that. Never saw much of a change that directly affected my life, the ones I care about's lives, right? I'm a provider. So when that didn't happen, I was like, let's try the next guy. At this point, I'm running through options. That's how much I think this vote matters.
Yeah.
It's a multiple choice test off of, which lesser evil or better poker play. I don't know.
A big thing with Joe Biden was the student loan stuff. And it didn't happen. And that was another reason why I felt jaded against, the Democratic Party. Like, they promised this thing, it didn't happen. Why am I even bothering? So that's one of the reasons that I forgot about now, but that is one of the reasons.
Okay, so those clips there, one was from the Latinas group, one was Latinos group, and the third one was from under 35s. Jen, there's been a real misperception that Harris was too far left for these folks, and some people are even arguing now that Democrats should just forget about them because they're gone forever, supposedly. What did you hear in these clips?
I mean, I heard people wanting real change that they could feel in their lives, and feeling like they have been at this for a while. They voted for different people time and time again, and everything feels a little bit stuck and everything feels the same, or in the case of the woman who was speaking, it feels worse. It even feels worse than it was in COVID. And I think we've been seeing that in our own analysis of what's been happening, not only how the world is changing, but just that reality of the past 50 years of increasing inequality. When you added inflation on top of that, which was, of course, a global phenomenon coming out of the COVID pandemic, it really just kind of broke people. So, I mean, when I listen to them, it doesn't sound like they're gone forever. It sounds like they still want to hear from someone who's going to talk to them about why their lives are hard and how we can get out of it. So it doesn't seem to me like completely gone. I think the other piece I picked up was just a disappointment in the governing that happened under Democrats, under Biden, and the sort of need to keep working on that, doing a better job governing, but also doing a better job of telling the public better stories about the governing so that people can actually click into it a little bit differently.
Yeah. So, this gets us to something that I know you wanted to talk about, which is the research that we do here at Way to Win and why it's so important. I mean, it's so important because these people aren't gone. We just have to figure out how to reach them. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the research we do, how we go about it, and why it's so important.
Yeah. Thank you. I do think it's a good chance to sort of take a step back and understand why is Way to Win looking into these voters in particular, but just in general, kind of what is the process that we've been using as we get into this world of persuasion, right? Because ultimately, it's about persuading voters like these to get more engaged, come out, get involved, not just vote, but like feel like can take part in democracy. It's a persuasion exercise. And so at Way to Win, we take this approach that is really based off of a very well-known model called Agile model that they use in startup culture a lot, which is called listening plus art plus science, is what we call it. It's comes out of build, measure, learn, which is an Agile process. So it's is really rooted in deep listening. And that's where these particular focus groups and other kinds of qualitative research that we do comes from, is like not coming in with necessarily a lot of predispositions about how people feel, but really listening to not just what they think, but how they feel, and understanding the why behind the what, going a little bit deeper. That's the basis. And then from that deep listening and research, we work to create content. And that can look like, a piece of advertising. It could look like a partnership with a grassroots group to do a locally based campaign. It could look like working with online content creators who are speaking with their audiences. So the creation can come in lots of different forms, but we feel like it's important to start with the research and then go to the content creation. And then we go to evaluation. So then we bring more science into the table, or more science into the conversation. Primarily, we do that with our kind of 30-second or 1-minute videos that we create and our partners create. And then we test those using a variety of different tools, and using randomized control trials where people would view the video and view a different control video, and you can actually see the difference between how people feel about Democrats, how people feel about issues after watching your video. So that kind of evaluation just gives us more, right, data points and understanding of messages that move. Our ultimate goal in everything we do is to try to find messages that unite across this diverse coalition that we have. Diverse in many ways, of course, age and race and gender, but also ideology, how people think about the world, and that big kind of anti-MAGA coalition that we've been able to mobilize over the course of the last few cycles is super important to the current moment of now and going forward. Building a kind of durable coalition that can push for the right kind of, change that we all want. So that's the process. When we get good messages, then we help deploy them out. That can look like distribution in lots of different ways. Like we do have a lot of grassroots and other kinds of partners who distribute messages and on signs and, at doors, as well as on digital ads and content creator work. So that's just a little sneak peek into under the hood of how we do our research work and our message development work, and are definitely informed by a lot of important partners and people in this space who've been taking a similar kind of research-backed approach. So in the case of these particular voters, like we've been talking about, we believe that they are persuadable. They just simply weren't persuaded, in this particular election. And as we've looked at the voter files from the different key states like Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina, that's where Way to Win did the bulk of our work and funding in 2024. We can see that these exact voters, turned out at lower rates than the modeled and registered Republicans across these states. And we also saw in the data that in the states where we were working, these voters actually turned out at higher rates than they did in other places like California, New York, Illinois, where we didn't have programs. So it shows that it's the right direction. It wasn't enough in this case, but it also shows, I think, that there's a lot of potential here. And so that's why we feel it's important to continue to have a lane of inquiry into these skippers.
Right. Well, and I just have to say, like, one of the first things when I came here that I noticed is that Way to Win's always striving to find messages that are motivating and persuade a large group of people across the spectrum rather than siloing. And it took me a while to go, oh, wait, I see what they're doing here. So I just think that's a really important part of the research that Way to Win has developed over time.
Right.
So, all right, so let's get back to the skippers here. It's a great segue. We get to what we're trying to do is get to know these voters just a little bit better. And what isn't true about them, which we've kind of gone through. Let's lay out some truths now about them. So first off, we heard a lot of defeatism, demoralization, and disappointment from these groups. They were sort of deeply frustrated and upset about the status quo, the government, and the Biden administration's failure to address their needs. As we've heard from one woman already, I mean, that was a kind of a tragic, just hearing her go through the needs that she had that weren't met. But let's listen to some more of these Biden skippers in their own words.
Okay, Biden's in office, but he didn't do anything.
Okay.
It was just like, okay, he's in office. He didn't like follow through with a lot of the stuff he promised. So it's like, okay, I did this. You promised me this. You didn't do it. What am I supposed to, how am I supposed to believe you? Like, how am I supposed to buy what you're selling, basically? So it's like, you know, it was just like, I don't care anymore. It was just like, part of my brain is just like, I don't know how to even deal with it.
That was the first time I wasn't able to vote for Obama. Like I said, that was the first time age-wise I was able to. The second thing was I was subconsciously persuaded by the political climate at that time where I felt like a change had to happen. And with little to no research, I would say, I just made that conscious choice to do it.
Okay. And 24?
Between 2020 and 2024 is when I would say I started doing a lot more research into previous votes. And to answer your question that was put into the chat, my response was the Electoral College. I'm not sure how we're voting as a people for a particular candidate, but in 3 of the last 6 elections, another candidate has been chosen as the president.
Okay.
It started with, for me and my age, for how old I am, it started with Al Gore and George Bush, where Al Gore, I went to bed as a kid, I remember this specifically, I went to bed as a kid as Al Gore being the president, and I woke up with George Bush somehow being the president.
Okay.
And that was because of some county in Florida had to recount the votes, and all of a sudden George Bush was president. But Al Gore won the popular vote. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote against Trump the first time.
Okay.
And then, you know, it's just multiple instances of this. So I'm saying if the people are selecting one person, how is the Electoral College just picking someone else? And I understand how it works. I understand, you know, we all have to have there's different sizes and different populations in the states. I understand.
I don't know. Black people see through it. We all see through it, but it's just weird. It's uncomfortable. I don't know. Like I said, it's just fake. And we all know it is. So, like, at this point, we're all just kind of watching a movie. You guys seen that movie, Don't Look Up, on Netflix? That's like we're living in that. So, I mean, it's kind of a joke now.
Yeah, so those clips, the first one was from the under 35 group, and the second 2 were both from the Black men group that we're going to get into in another episode further and more deeply. But boy, are these people just the opposite of underinformed? I have to say that. But anyway, Jenifer, let's talk a little bit about sort of the disappointment and the defeatism that we hear in these clips.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you definitely hear what we've heard in other groups too about the system being sort of stacked against them. There's a feeling that, yeah, it's all sort of rigged, you know, the Electoral College, it doesn't matter what I do. There's definitely a feeling of, I would say, defeatism, like you hear that, you know. But then you definitely also hear that point again about they didn't feel that Biden delivered on the promises. And that was something that, you know, we've talked about on this podcast of people wanted the change Biden promised, and that a lot of that change didn't materialize in the governing because we had such a tight, slim majority, and we had senators who were Democrats who were not voting with Democrats, like Kirsten Sinema and Manchin. They blocked a lot of the bigger reforms, you know, and then of course the Supreme Court, picked by Trump, blocked a lot of the student loan work, so, or, you know, upended it. So in a way, you know, I think it just continues to show that, like, there needs to be a different story being told to them about what Democrats are going to do or doing while they're in office. And, like, I think a little bit more persuasion as it relates to, you know, these people all live in battleground states, and they should, I think there should be a way to get those messages across to them a little bit more. And I don't know if, you know, they weren't seeing those messages in their states, but it's different than if you live in a place that doesn't feel as connected to the actual presidential electoral college, and these people are. So I do feel like that's sort of interesting.
Yeah, I've heard some other skipper, focus groups, but they've been out of New York and California. So it's, that's different than the battleground voters that we're listening to.
Yeah.
But by and large, these voters were not into Trump, and they had a very poor opinion of the Republican Party. So I wanted to listen to some clips of them talking about how they think about Republicans.
Couple months, getting better, getting worse?
Yeah, I think we're getting worse in terms of the news that we're hearing, right? So we may not be aware of all of the details behind the scenes, but in terms of this whole immigration, that's a major thing that the news is promoting. I'm hoping that there's more going on in the government beyond, immigration simultaneously. But this just the news promoting immigration certainly gives off sentiments of racism, of dictatorship type of rulership, because it seems like this president now has this autonomy to do whatever he'd like without any kind of restraint. So there's this sense of, for me at least, a negative tone that's going out from this this government we have now.
And what comes to mind when you think about the Republican Party?
Extreme.
How about others?
Greedy.
Okay.
Power.
Okay. Anything else?
The 1%.
Like I said, I feel that they're at one point, I said that I feel that the government has no checks and balances, and this is an opportunity for us to bring that back. We should put people in power that are going to make a difference and to check the government, right? Make sure to hold them accountable for the Constitution and for the laws that we have in place. Right now, it doesn't feel like that's happening.
Okay, so the first clip was from the Latinos group, and the last two clips were from the Latinas group. And let's see, 1%, extreme, greedy, power. They don't sound like, Republican super fans here, Jen. What's your thought?
Yeah, and I mean, I think we heard a lot in these groups of fear and anxiety and just a sense of people in general feeling pretty uneasy and kind of bleak about the current moment. They weren't feeling great about how Trump is doing. They weren't feeling great about a lot of things that are coming out, especially around immigration. That definitely popped up in a lot of the groups, but also the cuts that Elon Musk and Doge have been doing across the government, that those also really came up. So yeah, when you listen to them, they're not kind of Trump curious even. They really don't like Trump, and they don't like what Trump is doing now. It makes them feel bad about the direction that the country is going. And so that's what I heard in some of that.
We did hear, I'll make a note that and we're going to get into this in future episodes, but we did hear that during the election, we could hear in some of the groups from men that that men of color, that they were cross-pressured a little bit. There was a sense that they could the Latinos were just not cross-pressured at all. They did not like Trump. They did not like Republicans. But there were some men that indicated not necessarily an affinity, but I don't know, a little bit of a resignedness, if that makes sense, to Trump. My business might do okay. I remember one guy kind of saying, well, my business might do okay, that type of thing. That was before they were in office. This is related to his thinking, back during the election. So, all right. Okay, so another thing that we heard out of these groups was a lot of skepticism and cynicism. So I wanted to touch in with that for a second with some sound from the participants.
I want to ask quickly, like, was anyone tempted to vote for a third party candidate at all? Okay,
Oh, yeah.
who?
The Kennedys.
Yeah, you got it.
You guys say Robert J. Kennedy?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Any one of the Kennedys.
Anyone else? Was anyone else tempted to vote for third party or no?
No.
Okay.
It's just sad because like we don't allow that in our country because like if we, you know, sort of like go another way that's apart from either red or blue, your vote's technically not, going to count. It's really sort of like useless, like go another way. It's like, I don't know why the main reason for that is, but that's how this country's always been. You can either go one, type of direction. Either you're a Republican or a Democrat.
So you're saying there'd be like no point to vote third party anyways, is what
I don't
is
see
you're
that
getting?
in my own lifetime, or in a future far, far away from this country that's ever going to vote for like a third party. As much as we want to, like no one's going to fall. I could be like the only one who votes for like the Kennedys, and no one else is going to fall. Maybe along with me.
Okay, and then
I just want to say in response to that, this is why I think that the primary is so important. If we're going to only have two parties, I need to be able to select my own personal type of Democrat that has differing within the Democratic Party, the differing sections. And it's just like the only version of that we have where we get to pick. And it felt like in the 2024 election, we just got handed something that was forced upon us a little bit. That's what I wanted to say.
I don't think I would have changed it. I think someone mentioned it earlier where I do believe they decide who's going to go into office, and all of this is kind of just a big show to make people believe that we have some sort of power. But I know, voting locally does matter a lot more. I guess not more, but it impacts you a little closer versus just voting nationwide, where it seems like, whoever's going to be in that seat has already been decided. And so, no, I don't think that.
Right. But what changed for me was I'm in North Carolina. I don't remember the politician's name, but there was a woman who ran as a Democrat and then randomly, like very quickly, switched to Republican after she got everybody's vote. And so that is really what demotivated me and sticks with me, the way that it was a theory at first. For me, I wasn't too sure if there was really Republicans running as Democrats, like people with conservative views, just running as a Democrat just to win the vote, because a lot of people do vote that way. They're just going to hit Democrat either way. And so that's the perspective I hold now, that it's just, again, just puppeteering.
I don't think that no matter if we would have voted for Kamala or if you voted for Trump, that the 1% is going to be affected that greatly, because the 1% are the ones that put them into office to begin with. They're the ones that fund these elections to begin with. So I don't believe that they're going to be as affected as that ad would like us to believe.
Okay, so we heard a lot. We heard several clips there. First one from the under 35s, and then several of the other ones were from the Latinos group. A real sense of loss of control there. What struck you, Jen?
Yeah, just that. I think we really haven't reckoned with how out of control people feel. And you could hear it in the voices when it came to, somebody, I voted for this person and then she switched parties and became a Republican. That's such a feeling of like things that are out of your control. Hearing about, the reaction to, well, voting for these Democrats isn't going to necessarily change how the 1% lives. Like that idea about the economic system that we have and is really hurting people, and that they haven't yet heard a really strong argument from the Democrats that they're going to change that for them. And so I think that connection between people feeling out of control generally in their lives and then people feeling out of control around those economic questions, what is super real.
Yeah, and it's super real. There's one more thing that I really wanted to touch on for this episode, which is the sort of the backlash to Trump. I mean, we've had some tinges of that in the sound so far, but particularly for what Trump is doing now around the oligarchy, Elon Musk and, all the favors for the billionaires, along with immigration, which, supposedly is like his big, strong suit, although we are starting to see some slippage in the polls, even on his immigration polling. But let's listen to a little bit of this sort of Trump backlash to the policies he's been putting forward in the first 100 days.
Being able to call a lawyer without being able to get any help. And the person had legal right to be in the United States. So, people don't really, I don't think they understand the impact that's happening to human beings every day by these orders and these changes. And I think that we need to start seriously looking at this and think about if that was your mother, think about if that was your brother, think about how that would feel personally.
That's literally an attack on. I'm just gonna say that what's going on in Florida right now. That's a concentration camp. That's all I want to say. This is literally an attack on a specific group. This isn't. This is. I'm shut up.
No, it's a shame. It's an absolute shame because, like, as hard it is, to say immigrants built this country.
Man.
In office, wasn't even elected, and Musk is what I'm speaking of, and it's like when you got all this concentration of wealth and power, it gets to the point to where these to me, the way I see it, Trump will start nitpicking a bunch of random unqualified people to lead, so I think a lot of it stems from the influence and wealth that a lot of folks have accumulated.
Yeah.
Regardless of the fact that I'm for like free market and capitalism, but it's a tough catch.
Coming out of there, people are really tuned into the lack of due process, and I think there's a sense of like, if anyone doesn't get due process, no one's getting due process, right? I mean, if you don't get your chance to make your case in court, then who even knows what happened? And then also, Doge. I mean, Elon Musk has sort of faded into the background a little bit since he face planted in Wisconsin, but he's still pulling. Doge is still making big cuts, and doing big data breaches and all sorts of things. So it's still very active. I just feel like they've kind of tried to like muffle Elon Musk a little bit. But what stuck out to you?
Yeah, I think part of what stuck out was just how engaged people were on the immigration issue. I wasn't expecting that because it was kind of a weird issue coming out of 2024 where we were seeing all these numbers, people moving to the right on immigration. In hearing these people, these voters reflect on it, it really makes me feel like Trump's overreaching. The things that Trump is doing in the immigration space right now are landing with people in a way that goes far beyond where they were, even coming out of the election. And so I see them, I see them feeling it and like recognizing it in a new way. So I think that's interesting. I think it's, we had seen definitely the opportunity to hit Trump before the election. We were one of the few groups that was pushing messaging around, let's attack him on these mass abduction plans that we saw that were coming down the road. And that really didn't happen in the election. And so I feel like, I don't know. For me, it was just kind of like I was happy, at least glad that they were following it and that it was landing in a way that it's upsetting to them. And they don't think it's normal or they don't think it's okay. And they're not just ready to write it off because, immigrants are bad or immigrants there's too many immigrants coming to the country, which are some of the narratives that you often hear, in the kind of how to swing voters think about this. So that's what I took away.
Absolutely. And I just want to add that the focus groups were conducted 3 weeks ago. So
Right.
a lot of some of the very worst stuff that we've seen in the last like couple weeks hadn't even, hit the radar yet. I mean,
Yeah.
the things that we're seeing now, the showdown with the Supreme Court, the 9-0 ruling, and the White House's just complete failure to respond and ignoring the Supreme Court, et cetera. So this was like, it's gotten way worse even since we conducted these groups. So it's kind of
Yeah, for sure.
amazing.
Yeah, it's true.
All right. So I think that's a good place to leave it because we do have sort of next week we built a little bit of a profile of who these Biden skippers were. Next week, we're going to get a little bit more further into the campaigns, the things that, they didn't, that didn't work for them. And also, as you're starting to see, like, it looks like there's some light at the end of the tunnel. Like, it looks like there's an opening maybe for 2026. Jen, did you have a final word that you wanted to add, or are you good?
I mean, I'm good. I guess like for me, and I know we've talked about this as a team, but that overall, right, our big takeaways have been that these voters didn't skip this election because they were worried about Kamala being too woke or too left or too liberal. And that if they had shown up, I mean, we asked them, who would you have voted for if you did vote? And it was almost unanimously Kamala Harris. So we understand that they're not leaning toward Trump, but that they are disappointed and skeptical and feeling out of control and really wanting bigger change. So I would just kind of summarize that as our overall takeaways. But next week, it'll be really interesting to hear more about not only how they viewed the campaign as a way for us to think about what's needed going forward in campaigns, but then also a little bit more about just how they're viewing 2026.
Absolutely. And next week, we've got a barn burner of a guest for you. So I'm not going to say who it was. This is a teaser.
I don't think I can say it.
I'm not going to say it. I promise I won't. All I'm going to say is that we're going to have this person on. They're an expert in polling. They're an expert, they're a longtime campaign operative who's also worked in government. And they should be super insightful. And I assume that most everyone who listens to us has listened to them at some point. So I'm remaining gender neutral. The buzz, you don't know who it is, could be anyone. But join us next week for our next episode. And if you want to read more about our findings, I did want to mention that we had a big article go up on Rolling Stone from reporter Tessa Stewart today. Just published a great piece titled "Democrats Lost Them. Here's why 2020 Biden voters sat out the 2024 elections." So you can go, Google that or DuckDuckGo it or whatever you do, search for it online. You can find that at Rolling Stone. And thank you, as always, to our listeners. We appreciate you and your dedication to the work of rebuilding our democracy, which at its core is about building coalitions and common cause across groups with different biographies and lived experiences. And please, please, please stay connected locally. Authoritarian movements count on people feeling disconnected, alone, and powerless. And connecting locally is an antidote to that feeling of powerlessness. So, lastly, if you appreciate us, please go to our Substack, go to wherever you get your podcasts, and subscribe to Charting the Way Forward. Leave a fantastic review. We could definitely use, we want you to be in our crew, and the bigger our crew is, the bigger it gets. So check us out on Blue Sky. We'll be updating with more information that we're getting about these Biden skippers. And with that, we will see you next Thursday. Until then, do good, be well, hug your loved ones, and tell your dog I say hi.
Tell your dog I say hi too.